Hey Aaron, glad you could join us from the Singularity University in this great event, and I loved your first two pitches, and I'm going to do another one tomorrow on augmented reality, virtual reality.
Correct.
So if you look at augmented reality and virtual reality, and what would be the three things that have the most impact on the consumer and on the future?
Yeah, so augmented and virtual reality at the moment is seeing an incredible pace of development. So things are changing very quickly. But one of the things that we're seeing happen already today is that as an interface, the thing that's most important to note about augmented and virtual reality is they bring computing into three dimensions. You now have sort of a spatial, three-dimensional way of communicating all kinds of things. So from a consumer standpoint, this means that, if I want to go shopping online, if I want to try on a pair of glasses, say, it's very difficult to do that using a website. But with augmented reality, and there are companies like Warby Parker who's doing this, for example, where you can actually just see exactly what does it look like when I put on these glasses. The other thing is that's important to note about this spatial computing is the idea that you can actually see in your environment how a product might influence or interact with your space. So an example, IKEA, for example, is creating applications where you can actually see does this couch fit in my living room? Does the aesthetic match the room that I'm designing? And this spatial computing really gives you a full sort of experiential way of interacting. So ultimately, just to summarize, these platforms really transform the experience of a customer to really get a feel for the products and services that are being offered in a really rich and compelling way.
If you look at augmented reality, and within augmented reality, are there some specific trends that you want to highlight within augmented reality?
Yeah, so there's a few ways in which augmented reality is transforming the world. There's probably two specific, I should note, there's two kinds of augmented reality that's worth making note of. One is just augmented reality as an interface to sort of observe and see the world. So layering information, for example, like I just mentioned, IKEA, being able to place a virtual couch in my living room and see what it looks like. Another kind of augmented reality that I think retailers and all kinds of businesses should be aware of is what you might call location-based augmented reality. And a good example of that is something like Pokemon Go, where you now have a way of layering information that changes where people go, why they go there, what they do when they get there, all without changing a single thing about the physical world. All you've done is layered, in this case, Pokemon into the real world. And you see companies like Starbucks who have partnered with the game, and now people are, in my own experience, I'll walk 3 blocks out of the way on the way to the gym in my neighborhood in San Francisco because there's a Starbucks and because I can catch Pokemon. I should mention I play a lot of Pokemon Go, no judgments. But again, this is a counterintuitive effect of a technology, and it's a very specific kind of augmented reality. It changes where people go and how they spend their time, and I think companies should be aware of that.
Okay, thanks. So we talked also a little bit about in the presentation about segmentation and how we could use technology for segmenting. So what would be your view on that, on segmentation, and maybe on a geographical level, age level?
Yeah, so part of the discussion that we're having here at this event is the future of the customer experience, the future of the consumer, what I spoke on, and I think what's important to note is that it's a very it's a very broad label to give a very big topic, because when you really start to unpack things, segmentation is completely transforms how an environment unfold. So you can segment by an infinite number of ways. Product category, geography, region, age demographics, gender. All of these things that each have their own unique sort of impacts on consumer life. So technologies, and we're having conversations at this event about the role of data and the role of artificial intelligence and being able to manage data, manage the profile of your consumer in really significant ways. that becomes ever more important in a world where consumer expectations today are ones where people really expect to have personalized experiences that meet their own demands and expectations as a consumer. And that's not possible today because of many of these information technologies.
Okay. So thinking a little bit into the future, we see a lot about gamification and computer games. Of course, the gaming industry is getting bigger and bigger. TV industry, Netflix is getting bigger and bigger. So you see something like a merge between the advertising industry and using, let's say, those kind of games and TV shows, etc.
Yeah, that's something that I'm not as intimately familiar with as a concept, and I heard a great example from many of your colleagues at SAP who's it seems like what you're doing is, and it makes incredible amount of sense, is as these television programs are being viewed, and there's already Netflix experimenting with personalized experiences within the TV show, you can start to build in these product tie-ins and on demand in that moment find out like what is that product, where can I access that in real time, and I think the point here as well that's as interesting that's happening is that shopping and making purchasing decisions no longer just isolated to dedicated spaces like a shopping mall, like a retail store. Now you're seeing integration with, like you mentioned, Netflix. Instagram's a great example. They've just launched a shopping platform as part of their application, and so really blurring the lines between entertainment and experience with shopping and consumer habits, or consumer life. I think that's something that all businesses, no matter what industry you're in, if you sell a product directly to consumers, should be aware of. People can buy anywhere.
Okay, so now maybe you got a little bit out of context here, but you're a researcher as well from Singularity University. And we all think that things are happening in Silicon Valley, but we also have a speaker tomorrow on China and how China is revolutionizing the world actually on technology. So do you also look a lot at China and what they are doing?
So in my own research, my own bias is definitely skewed towards the Western world, particularly in the United States. I'm lucky actually spend a lot of time in the Netherlands, so I have some context of the Dutch market. But when it comes to China, there are a few things that I've done research as it relates to augmented and virtual reality. The one thing that I can make a point about is when it comes to those technologies, unlike in the West, in China, at the highest levels of government, augmented and virtual reality as technology platforms are being supported in their development. And actually the consumer market has adopted these technologies at a far greater pace and at a scale that would just amaze anyone in the West. If you go to a shopping mall in China, I was recently in Shanghai last year, there are virtual reality kiosks just everywhere. It's just a common part of daily life. The penetration of people who've actually tried these technologies is far greater, far more in China than even here in the West. And I think a larger, broader point is that the consumer habits of a market like China. I mean, come on, massive, unbelievably huge marketplace. That's going to really shape the economy in really unforeseen ways, but in a pretty dramatic way in the coming years. So it's something that I should become more familiar with. I'm certainly not as familiar with as I should be, but certainly important going forward.
Yeah, because I think they have the ambition to be the biggest economy by 2030 or something like that. So looking back at your research and the presentations you heard so far, so what would be the top three takeaways that you could help our customers with? So what would you do as a first step?
I think a first step is it's actually very simple, but can be very difficult, especially for a previously successful company. If you're working at a successful company, is to take a step back and actually just survey the landscape. How are things changing? Are things what you thought? Like it's actually I was reading a book last year about survival, and it's actually found that people that are more likely to survive some kind of significant ordeal, like getting lost in the woods or a rock climber getting caught on the side of the mountain, the people that are actually more likely to survive it happens because they simply understood that they were in danger. It's the hiker who fails to notice that they're lost that's more likely to, to actually fail to take action. So step one is to just, take a step back and survey the landscape. Step two is to understand that we don't actually know the ways in which the future is going to unfold. At Singularity University, we don't predict the future. We're trying to make sense of all the possible future scenarios. And so step two is to just become comfortable with this ambiguous environment that's being shaped. The third thing I would argue is a company that's going to survive, and we've heard this a lot in the sessions throughout the day today, is really around experimentation. It's, someone showed the quote that, Thomas Edison, when he, I didn't fail 10,000 times, I just found 10,000 ways that it won't work, right? Like finding failure is actually your step towards, making progress, and experimentation, failing is the only way to navigate the complexity and ambiguity of the world that we're living in now. And so, yeah, companies really need to become good at experimentation, trial and error, testing, and that will companies that learn to navigate in that way will be able to meet the challenges of this ever-changing world.
Okay, thank you, Aaron.
Thank you so much.